Okay, folks, this is the Progressive Short Takes. I'm your host, Joe Firestone, and the title of this one is Paying for the Green New Deal, Part 2, and it's a follow-on to the short take, the not-so-short take that I just did. Hopefully this one will be a little bit shorter. So, in order to get to this, what I want to do is share a blog post that I did some time ago. Sometime back in the summer of 2011. That's a while ago. And this one was called Beyond the Debt Ceiling, the $30 trillion plan for ending borrowing and the national debt. Okay, and let me make sure you're seeing that. I guess you are seeing that, so very good. And the author of this is Let's Get It Done, which was my handle on some of the blogs that I was writing for at that time, including Daily Costs, including Fire Dog Lake, as I recall, and including the Currenti Wire. When I first began to blog, I was doing work, in the knowledge management area, and I wanted to have a degree, of anonymity, so I appropriated the handle, Let's Get It Done. And so that's the handle I used, at Daily Costs. So let me go quickly through this. I start by pointing out the legal authority for using the platinum coin, actually 1 ounce platinum coins, and I talk about coin seigniorage. I'm not going to go over that, in any detail. I've left the link to this so you can read it. Thanks, honey. So, I point out that coin seigniorage is now being mentioned increasingly on popular blogs. I wrote this, actually, when did I write it? On July 21st of 2011. That was 10 or 11 days before the resolution of the debt ceiling crisis. When it looked like it maybe wasn't going to be resolved, and when I thought this kind of knowledge might be valuable for the president. I have no evidence to indicate that any of the hubbub about the platinum coin at that time got through to the president's desk. I know it did in 2012 and 2013 because of statements he made at that time. But I'm not sure that the 2011 uproar ever got to his desk. It would have greatly helped him if he wanted to be helped in this way. What I mainly wanted to focus on here, though, was that this was the first time that anybody had suggested minting a coin with a face value as large as the $30 trillion. There was a logic to this, which is outlined here, in this particular blog post. But the overall point was that I wanted a number that was big enough to pay off the debt that was owed at that time, and to leave enough to cover deficit spending for some time to come. And that starts with this. this fourth variation on the idea of using platinum coins. Why not mint a 30T coin, okay, and then another one in case the Fed gets obstreperous sometime down the road and presents the 30T coin that was deposited in the Mint Public Enterprise Fund account, okay, the PEF account, for redemption. That is, technically, the Fed had the option open to it of accepting the 30T coin, giving reserves to the Treasury Department, okay, to the Mint, which would then, the Secretary of the Treasury would then sweep the Mint's account for the seniorage, which would be almost the whole 30T, and then that would go into reserves in the Treasury spending account. But the question was, what would happen if the Fed suddenly decided that it didn't want the 30T coin any longer, okay, and it basically presented it for redemption at the Treasury Department? Then, of course, the Treasury Department would be obligated to redeem the coin, okay, in other currency or coins. So the idea here was to mint a second 30T coin that would sit in a vault at the Treasury that would not be turned into reserves, but that the Treasury Department could use just in case a chair of the Fed decided, I don't want this coin anymore, so I'm going to return it, okay, to the Treasury, force them to come up with another one, okay, for redemption. So that was the idea of having two coins. Anyway, I said I favor this fourth alternative because it institutionalizes the idea that there's a distinction between appropriations, the mandate to spend particular amounts on particular goods and services, and the capability to spend the mandated accounts. In a fiat currency system, the capability always exists if the legislature actually provides for it under the Constitution. But the value of the 30T coin and the profits derived from it is that it is a concrete reminder of the government's continuing ability to buy whatever it needs to meet public purposes. It demonstrates very concretely that the government cannot run out of money, that the claim that it can is not a valid reason for rejecting spending that is in accordance with the public purpose. So in reading what follows, please keep in mind, okay, the distinction between the capability to spend more than government collects and taxes and the appropriations that mandate such spending. The capability is what's in the public purse, and it is unlimited as long as the government doesn't constrain itself from creating currency. With coin seniorage, its capability could be and should be publicly demonstrated by minting the $30 trillion coin and getting the profits from depositing it at the Fed. On the other hand, congressional appropriations, not the size or contents of the public purse, but whether the purse strings are open or not, determines what we spent and what will be spent and what will simply sit in the purse for use at a later time. So there is a very important distinction between the purse and the purse strings. The president can legally use coin seniorage to fill the purse, but only Congress, actually the Secretary of the Treasury this is, but on orders of the president, Secretary of the Treasury would do it, but only Congress can open the purse strings through its appropriations. If the president decided to rise above the debt ceiling controversy, safeguard the social safety net, and do something really, really important from the perspective of history by using 30T coin seniorage, then he could explain the deposit of the first $30 trillion coin to the public in a high-profile TV address, This way, the second coin just stays at the mint for safekeeping, its existence to be kept secret. So here's a speech for the president, Obama, that I offered on July 21st, 2011, to help him get by the debt ceiling problem. And I also offered, of course, the proposal of minting the 30T coins and depositing one at the Fed. Okay, later, I thought, 10 years is not enough. I really want to do this for 15 to 25 years, so I'm going to double the amount to $60 trillion. And I started blogging about a $60 trillion coin instead of a $30 trillion coin. But Stephanie Kelton picked this up, and at some point, she was the first to suggest actually using a $100 trillion coin, because that was a nice and memeable number. Anyway, here's the speech, and that's what I wanted you to focus on, because I really like this speech from a marketing point of view. My fellow Americans, until now, we've been borrowing the money the government created back from the private sector in order to cover our deficit spending. So the national debt has been steadily growing. That's silly. According to the Constitution, the government of the people, by the people, and for the people is the ultimate source of all U.S. money. So why should we ever borrow U.S. money back and pay interest on it, since we can create it any time by the authority of the Constitution and Congress? Congress has also imposed a debt ceiling, which, as you know, we've now reached. So we can't borrow back our own money anyway. So on my order, and in accordance with legislation passed by Congress in 1996, and with the U.S. Code, the U.S. Mint has issued $30 trillion in a single platinum coin and deposited it at the New York Fed. It's legal tender. So the Fed credited the Public Enterprise Fund, that's the Mint's bank account at the New York Fed, with about $30 trillion in USD credits, using its unlimited authority from Congress to create US dollars. This is not inflationary, because the Fed will put our coin into its vault and keep it there permanently out of circulation. And we will use the $30 trillion in USD credits, the reserves, only to pay back debt and to spend what Congress has already approved, which is only a fraction of these credits and far from the amount needed to cause inflation. My action ends the debt ceiling crisis, because we have no further need to borrow our own money back in the markets. So we don't need the Tea Party or other Republicans or even my fellow Democrats to agree to raise the debt ceiling. But now the Treasury has plenty of money, much more than we need, in fact, to pay for all appropriations Congress has already approved for 2011. And again, we won't have to borrow our own money back. So we will pay all government debts, which will come due in 2011, Treasury securities, and all other debts included. We will also pay back all debts held by other agencies of government and the Federal Reserve. When we do this, we will lower the national debt by about $7.5 trillion, reducing the debt burden by about half this year, and creating an actual Social Security trust fund with $2.6 trillion in cash reserves in it. And again, to do this, we don't have to borrow our own money back. And we will also reduce our interest costs on the outstanding national debt. None of the $30 trillion in new credit created by our actions is, quote, money, unquote, in the economy. until the Treasury spends it. For now, it is just capability to spend. Capability to spend, awaiting the appropriations of Congress to mandate deficit spending, should it need to compensate for the reduction in demand from the economy. Probably close to 10% of GDP right now, caused by your own desire to save, which we want to do our best to facilitate, and your own desire to import goods from foreign nations. We have created $30 trillion in new credits, even though we needed only a fraction of that to cover anticipated deficit spending and debt repayment until 2021. The reason for this is that I wanted to have enough capability created in the Treasury account so that the national debt can be completely paid off, except for a small amount in very long-term Treasury debt that would still not be mature by 2021. And all projected federal deficits covered over the next 10 years. Of course, we can always make new coins if our projections turn out to be wrong. But I thought it would be best to ensure that all 14.3 trillion, which is what the debt burden was back then, of the, quote, debt burden, unquote, can be completely eliminated from our political concerns, and also to provide enough funds in our spending account at the Fed so that it would be very clear to Congress and all newly elected representatives and senators that even though they, according to the Constitution, continue to control the purse strings, the national purse is very, very full, and that we will be able to afford whatever deficit spending for the public purpose, including for full employment and Medicare for all, that Congress, in its wisdom, chooses to appropriate now and before the election of 2012. Yes, I was lobbying for Medicare for all back in 2011, and in 2010, and in 2009, and every year since. Good night, my fellow Americans, and sweet dreams. Rest well knowing that our beloved country won't be defaulting on any of its debts, that I've prevented this without going over the legal debt ceiling, by providing money for spending mandated appropriations, in compliance with the laws authorizing coin seigniorage, while supporting the Constitution's prohibition against our government ever defaulting on its debts. I hope that in the future, everyone will obey the 14th Amendment's prohibition against questioning the validity of federal government debts and think twice before they indulge themselves in such loose talk. The United States will always pay its debts in U.S. dollars according to the terms of the contracts it has concluded and in line with the pension payments and other obligations that it owes. Neither you nor the rest of the world need ever doubt that again. So that was the speech that I wrote for the president in 2011 that he never used and probably never even saw. Okay, and then a second post, and I guarantee this won't be as long as the first short take I did. Hi, folks. Hi, Dolores. Hi, Kay. Okay, I wonder whether Deborah's still here. Anyway, okay, the second post is called, How Will You Pay for It? It was written much later in 2018, and it was written to actually be used by a congressional candidate at the time who was running in the Washington on the CD 10th. Okay, I see Deborah is still here. Hi, Deborah. Glad to see you're still hanging in there. Anyway, that one was not about trillion-dollar coins. It was about overt congressional financing. And it was entitled, How Will You Pay for It? And it was very short. It's among the shortest of my blog posts on record. It was written on May 28th of 2018. It's at my website. Okay, I left the link. I said, here's the best answer to the question posed in the title. I invite every progressive candidate to use it in 2018 and future elections. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution of the United States gives Congress the sole power to coin by U.S. money. Congress delegates, but does not give away this authority to the Treasury Department and the Federal Reserve, which Congress created in 1913 as the central bank of the United States and the primary banking agent of the Treasury Department. The 12 regional banks issue U.S. reserves, which are additions to reserve account balances. Okay, and what's a reserve account? That's the name given to basically a checking account at one of the 12 banks of the Fed. Okay, so in other words, you can add to the balances in the checking accounts exist at the Fed. That's one of the powers of the Federal Reserve banks. They can add to the checking account balances that exist at those banks. Of course, since the U.S. Treasury spending account is one of the accounts existing at those banks, okay, specifically at the New York Fed, we see that the Federal Reserve banks have the authority to increase the balance in the Treasury spending account. Okay, they have the authority to do that. Now, they only do that using certain business rules. What I'm proposing here is a change in the business rules legislated by Congress. Just as Congress created the Fed in 1913 and empowered it to create reserves by adding it to account balances, it can order the Fed to add to the balances in the Treasury spending account. So at the end of every bill, ordering the Treasury to spend on the programs Congress approves will also order the Federal Reserve to immediately increase the balance in the Treasury spending account by the amount we've ordered the Treasury to spend, and will also order the Federal Reserve to increase the same balance by enough for Treasury to pay back the portion of the national debt that will fall due during the period covered by our spending. And in this post, okay, I have a graphic which I often have used. I call this process overt congressional financing, OCF. And the two sentences that are to be added to every spending bill, to every appropriations bill, or every continuing resolution bill, or CR bill, as it's often called. Okay, in other words, the money bills Congress passes. And these two sentences. First one, okay, is upon passage of this appropriations bill, the Federal Reserve is directed to fill the Treasury spending account at the New York Federal Reserve with the addition to its reserve balance necessary to spend this appropriation. In addition, the Federal Reserve is directed to fill the Treasury spending account with the additions to the Treasury reserve balances necessary to repay all outstanding debt instruments, including principal and interest, as they fall due for the fiscal year of this appropriation. That's it. 2 sentences. If they're put into every money bill, that will create overt congressional financing for every money bill. It will be the Congress having the Federal Reserve top up the Treasury spending account in order for the Treasury to be able to repay the debt and to spend the appropriation which Congress is mandating that it spend. Sounds quite commonsensical, right? Why hasn't Congress been doing it all the time? I don't know. Okay, but to go on with the article. These orders in spending bills called overt congressional financing OCF, will provide the reserves Treasury needs to pay for, 1, all new spending without increasing the national debt, the debt subject to the limit, and 2, also paying back parts of it as it falls due until the national debt is eventually extinguished, which is a process I think will take either 10 years or if there's still 30-year debt that's new and out there at this point, it might take 30 years. But most of the debt would be gone in the first 2 or 3 years. Probably 95% of it would be gone in the first 2 or 3 years. And people would see, as it was getting paid down, that it was quickly getting paid down. Anyway, overt congressional financing, OCF, will end debt ceiling crises and but due to repayment of a large portion of outstanding debt within 6 months, will make it clear to the public that the unpopular national debt is not only not a real problem, but is also well on its way to extinction. It will also make clear to the public that the spending programs I am running on, because this is a short speech, a short answer that could be given by a candidate, in this case, Tamborine Borelli, who was running for the Congress in the Washington 10th at that time in 2018. And this was written for Tamborine to use. It will also make it clear to the public that the spending programs I'm running on can easily be paid for, quote unquote, by the Congress of the United States without disruption of the economy or raising federal taxes to, quote, pay for, unquote, federal spending. That's it. So why is this so desirable? Because once these 2 sentences were used just a few times, the effect of them would be obvious to people and could be pointed out by those who favored this particular language. So I believe that these 2 sentences would become institutionalized in Congress and would become part of every money bill, so that no debt would have to be issued ever again. Okay, and anybody who didn't want this language, okay, to be put in could be politically attacked simply by saying, oh, you're in favor of our nation going into debt again. You want to have a big number of national debt in order to terrorize people, don't you? And if that person were to reply by saying, no, that's not what I want. I just want the Treasury Department to be able to issue debt securities to people who want a safe investment, but then you reply by saying, okay, include in the bill a provision for the Federal Reserve to be able to issue debt securities to the private sector to give people a safe investment and to be able to set the interest rate on those particular securities. Fine, done. We'll take care of you. If you want that, we'll take care of you. No problem. But we're not going to have a national debt anymore that can be used to terrorize people, that can be used to persuade them that austerity is permissible when people need funding, when they need money, when events beyond their control have created a depression. We can't have austerity ideology anymore. We must instead have the spending for public purpose that the federal government has to make in order to provide for things like full employment, okay, and Medicare for all, and the Green New Deal, and any other major need of the public that comes up and becomes a part of the public purpose. Congress can't be hiding behind the idea that there are debt ceilings, behind the idea that it doesn't have the money, that it is somehow running out of money. These two sentences will ensure that it can never use that excuse again. As long as these two sentences appear in money bills, the whole justification for austerity in federal spending will be gone. All the justification, okay, that is now used. Okay, of course, it's possible that people will begin talking about the danger, okay, of inflation. I expect them to. And then we'll have a debate about the dangers of inflation, and have another blog which was written about the same time concerning that danger. I also have a third blog that was written about that time concerning whether PAYGO is in conflict with overt congressional financing. And of course, I pointed out it was entirely in conflict. And I called for getting rid of PAYGO at that time. So that does it for this progressive short take, which was not as long as the other one, but also still pretty long. So, okay, I'm going to say goodbye, and I'll be back soon with another progressive short take, but this time on another subject. Thank you very much for coming.